friends, it's Missy Hermes. I'm in the galleries at the Otter Tail County Historical Society Museum, and today, as you can see, it's time to remember our school days. And what a great scene. How many of you remember the many happy hours that you spent in school? And how many of you went to country school? How many of you went to town school? I'm definitely a town school girl. I rode the bus to school. How did you get to school? Think about some of those things. Now, the schoolhouse that we have in the museum represents a country school. And Otter Tail County had more schools than any other county in the state of Minnesota. We had, at one time, 289 different schools and one superintendent of schools that would visit each school at least 2 or 3 times a year because there were 3 terms. We call that a trimester now, and today in Otter Tail County there are really only 2 schools that are on a trimester system. The Perham Public Schools and Our Lady of Victory School here in Fergus Falls. Well, let's think about some of those school days and what that was like. For most of us that did go to country school, remember you started in about 1st grade and you went through 8th grade, and then you probably took the state test, and not everybody even went to high school. So think about what school did you go to, and about that teacher. I'm going to ring the bell just so we can hear what that sounds like. Right? The teacher would come out and she would ring the bell. It was time to come in, or it was time to come in from recess. And what was school like? Well, for the early pioneers in Otter Tail County, I've mentioned before, they only had school Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because girls stayed home on Monday to help with the washing. But for most of our pioneer and our early days of country school, it was Monday through Friday and 3 terms in a year, a lot of it based on when people were busiest with farming, right? And people walked to school. It was probably really unusual to have a school bus at one time. And I know my father-in-law talks about if it was cold, maybe his dad would hitch up the horses and bring them to town. It would probably have to be a really cold day. How far did you have to walk to school on your own or with your brothers and sisters? I know that they tried to have children not walk more than 5 miles one way. Can you imagine today walking, if we asked students to walk 5 miles to school? I don't know. I'm not sure what would happen. I'm sure parents maybe wouldn't like it either. But this schoolhouse is pretty awesome. We're going to pan a little bit later so you can see bringing our lunch to school, right? Now over here we have Hannah Kempfer, and she's probably one of the most famous teachers to ever work in Otter Tail County. And she was born in the 1880s and immigrated from Norway. And when she was a little girl, her family was desperately poor and they were unable to purchase new shoes. So think about getting new shoes, new clothes for school. Hannah didn't get that. Her dad made her a pair of wooden shoes to walk to school in, and they clomped on the wooden floor, and she said the other kids at school made fun of her. And so it was her dream, her wish to become a teacher someday so that she would make sure there was no teasing in school. Hannah also did something as a teacher that today we kind of take for granted. Most of us as kids brought a lunch pail with our lunch in it. Hannah Kempfer worked as a teacher in Edwards Township, and she instituted a program that gave her school the nickname the Hot Lunch School. What she did is she asked students, first of all, she had a stove like this one over here, maybe a little bit bigger, and she would set a big kettle of water boiling on that stove that was heating the room. And then she would ask everybody to bring something for the soup kettle. So you might bring a potato, you might bring an onion or some corn, and she would put that to simmering on the pot, in that kettle. And then at about noontime, she asked the bigger girls, and we know that the girls, or the bigger kids, sat at the back of the classroom, right? So the bigger girls would come and they might stir up some dumplings, and Hannah Kemper would make soup, and everybody could have a cup of hot soup with their lunch on a cold winter day. What a great idea. And one of her students said not only did they eat lunch, but they got some necessary lessons in good manners. Well, again, I've asked you, how did you get to school? Maybe some of you skied to school or rode a horse. What did you bring? Do you remember? Did your school have a library? We're going to think about a lot of those different things when we look at some artifacts from the Historical Society that have to do with schools. We were talking about the hot lunch program, and that's what I had growing up, right? I didn't always have to bring my lunch. If I did bring my lunch, it was in a lunchbox very much like this. I had one that was mystery date. Ooh, this one's Lassie. But a lot of you maybe carried one of these lunch pails. That's where we get the name pail. It looks like a little pail that might have had syrup in it, or it even looks like it could be a little paint can, right? Of course, you wouldn't want to put lunch in there, but I want you to think about what you carried in your lunch pail. What did your mom or dad or grandma pack for you in your lunch pail? Now you have to think about, it shouldn't be hard. These lunches were almost the same every day, right? Most of our farm families grew some fruit on their farm, and so there was likely to be an apple in the lunch pail. And just about all of us had a sandwich, right? So think about, what sandwich did you bring to school? I have a tour guide that used to work here who said her husband's favorite sandwich to bring when he was walking to school was, after the holidays, they would have a goose for Christmas, and his mom would pack goose grease sandwiches. Right, or lard sandwich. What did you have in yours? Cheese. I have here a peanut butter sandwich here. And then what did you have for dessert? Most likely your mom or grandma made some kind of cookie. And I want you to think about, what is your favorite kind of cookie? My mom made the most famous, she had a great sugar cookie, but this one here is, well, it could be, if we're lucky, it's a chocolate chip cookie, right? But more than likely, it's a oatmeal raisin. But think a minute about, what was your favorite cookie? Was it ginger snap, molasses, peanut butter? I have something else that I packed in the lunch, and more than one child that I know had to walk to school when it was cold winter day, and some very smart moms would, in the morning, bake potatoes. So I have a potato in here, and they would take that hot potato out of the stove, and as kids got ready in the morning, putting their jacket on, their winter hats and boots and such, Mom would put a baked potato in each pocket, and that was a little hand warmer for when they were walking to school. Now, some of you maybe even had a teacher that let you use the stove for baking a potato. You could bring some butter in your lunch, or even I've heard of people that brought a canning jar, a little mason jar, and had some soup that could be warmed on the stove too. So lots of things you could pack in our lunch. Someone told me their mom would take an oatmeal container and wrap it up the mason jar in newspaper and stick that in the oatmeal container so it didn't spill or didn't jog it. Now I have a few other memories for us. I brought a ruler, and some of you maybe remember that back in the day, teachers could punish their students. We don't do that anymore. We don't encourage that at all. But my mom was left-handed, and she went to Catholic school, and the nuns would spank her hand with the ruler if she tried to write with her left hand. Now, for the really naughty kids, your school maybe had one of these, the Board of Education. And look at this. It even has a listing of on the back of the dates when someone had to be paddled. My gosh, I've never even seen that before. So, eek. Let's hope that that doesn't happen again. Well, for those of you that went to country school, you'll maybe remember some really special days at school. One of the special days was the Christmas program. And everybody in a school district would come, even people that didn't have schools. So think a minute about, do you remember having to say a poem, remembering a piece that you were going to say? And there was a nativity scene. Somebody acted out Mary, and somebody was the star. Maybe somebody brought their doll. That was the baby Jesus in the play. And you might sing Christmas carols. We have a lot of memories of people having a live Christmas tree. Their whole class would go out with a sled and find and chop down a Christmas tree that they could bring into their classroom and put it in a sand pail, and maybe one of the dads would volunteer to keep the tree from catching on fire with the candles. Another day that you maybe remember was the day there was a spelling bee. Some schools had field day, and you might combine with other local school districts to have competitions, the three-legged race or softball throw. And that brings up some great memories too about what did you play during recess, right? So after you had eaten your lunch, you might go outside unless it was really cold. And what are some games that we played after lunch during recess? Maybe you played hopscotch, or maybe you had a jump rope, and maybe you played jacks. A lot of kids I know, people will remember playing marbles as a kid. And maybe you played Annie I Over or kitten ball. So those are some fun things. And the other thing that I know a lot of people remember is the day the superintendent of schools would come to visit your school. And no one was as nervous as the teacher, but also kids had to be on their best behavior too. And probably one of the best known superintendent of schools from Otter Tail County was a lady named Louise Stonedahl. And she was just really a wonderful person. And one day, unfortunately, she was driving her car. She was visiting schools in the Henning area, and it was a snowy day in March, and she got in a car accident and she passed away. But this is one of her legacies, and that's the educational helper. So you probably didn't know this if you were a school child, but if you were a school teacher in rural Otter Tail County, you'll remember getting the educational helper every month. This was something that Mrs. Stonedahl devised, and it would help teachers with poems, different crafts for students, information about vaccinations, or help selling Easter seals, things like that. All right, I hope you enjoyed thinking about what it was like to go to school. And as we close today, I'm going to read this on how to be a good citizen from back in 1954. These are probably good things to remember for a good citizen even today. A good citizen tries to control himself, to be courteous, to take care of his health, to be neat and orderly, to be honest and trustworthy, to take care of school property, to be saving, to be prompt, to play fairly, and to work out his own problems. All right, good words to remember until the next time we get together for some memories from the Otter Tail County Historical Society.